Neighbor tells Gramps he should mind his own dang business. That advice costs neighbor most of his yard and a car. Gramps had just moved into a retirement park with a lot that backed up to county land that was a nature preserve. His backyard was basically non-existent, but he didn't mind as he got to look out over the preserve. However, he did marvel at how his next-door neighbor's backyard extended a good 8 feet past his, giving neighbor a nice space back there. Gramps tried to be friendly with all his new neighbors, exchanging phone numbers and the like. And one day he noticed the next-door neighbor was putting down expensive pavers that extended from his back door all the way to the old fence posts that designated the preserve boundary. Gramps watched the neighbor yank the 3 rickety fence posts out of the ground and move them back an extra 2 feet into the preserve before pounding them back in, then started to clear the land, intending to gain himself more area for his pavers. Gramps used to work for the National Park Services as a young lad. So he thought he had better warn his neighbor of the consequences of his actions, so he heads out back for a little chat. Neighbor is immediately defensive, and before Gramps says much, neighbor tells him, "You're new here? I've been here 10 years and 2. Mind your own dang business." Gramps decides not to press the issue. Nothing happens that year, but the following year, when most of the park emptied out to head north for the summer, and the county comes by to check on the preserve, Gramps notices them going back and forth behind his neighbor's house. The workers are pulling out maps and taking photos and making phone calls, and soon more guys show up. Turns out neighbor has moved the posts several times over the years, and in reality, his backyard is supposed to be even smaller than Gramps' backyard. To make it worse, neighbor put pavers in the back specifically to park both his golf cart and a cherry red sports car back there for the summer. So the county will have to move them before they can do anything else. They tape a notice to the front door and leave. Gramps goes over to read it, and it states that neighbor was in violation of encroaching onto protected lands. He has 30 days to move his car, tear up the pavers, and pay a fine of $11,000, because of damage to endangered species who inhabit the protected lands, as well as trespassing fees. Failure to do so within 30 days will result in golf cart and car being towed and impounded. Pavers will be dug up and carted off at neighbor's expense, and the fine will increase for every additional day past the deadline. 30 days comes and goes, so a week after that Gramps has quite the show, as first the car and cart were towed, pavers were dug up and hauled off, and the old fence posts and ropes were replaced with metal posts embedded into buried cement bases, connected by steel cables. Whole process took several weeks to finish, but the preserve looked a lot more legit when they were done. A few solar cameras were installed so the county could monitor the wildlife and encroachers remotely. Meanwhile, more notices were taped to the front door of neighbor's house. By November, the snowbirds were flooding back into the park, including neighbor. That was Gramps' second show of the summer, as neighbor reads all the notices, digging down until he reads the first one, then runs out back and starts screaming and cussing up a storm before running back to his car to dig out his cell phone so he can call the county to find out where his car and golf cart were. Gramps stays indoors to avoid the guy as he is frantically trying to unload his car, turn on his water and electricity, get the AC and the toilets going, and all the while trying to get someone at county to pick up the phone and give him some answers. He finally gets a live person and proceeds to scream at them while on speakerphone about his car and cart. So the call keeps getting kicked to other people because who wants to help a screamer? Basically, neighbor is told to come to the county office to get this straightened out. 3 days later, neighbor catches Gramps outside and asks if he was here when the county stole his car and destroyed his backyard. Gramps said he was, and neighbor says, "Well, why didn't you call me when you saw them putting notices on my door? You had my number up north." Gramps said he had thought about doing that, but figured neighbor would prefer him to mind his own dang business. So he decided against it. Now to the comments. Grandpa played the long con. I like it. Plus, he didn't have to lift a finger to get the neighbor cited either. I'm surprised the neighbor didn't accuse your grandfather of calling whatever officials that came out. The part I'm wondering is, would the neighbor have even believed Gramps if he had called him? He probably would have ignored the warning from Gramps and told him off again. Don't mess with protected lands, they will duck you up. Ever wanted to know the price of an old endangered tree? You can't afford it. My high school had a college-style campus. Some kid thought it would be funny to cut down a bunch of trees on the campus for his senior prank. Turned out they were considered federal property and he had to pay a bunch of money, got expelled, and I heard he had to do a lot of community service. Lol. How is that even a prank? Haha. I'ma cut down these trees, that'll really get 'em. Why couldn't he just throw bouncy balls down senior hall like the rest of us? There is nothing in the world like a Gramps. Thank you for this beautiful story. It makes me miss my crotchety, old lovable Gramps. OP replied. So true. Gramps is precious and I cherish all my memories with him. All my Gramps died before I was born. Thankfully my parents are still around to give all 4 of my kids the Gramps experience. Assuming Gramps isn't the only neighbor, I'd say this guy isn't the most popular on the block. OP replied. Yeah, his behavior really stands out as everyone else has always been super friendly from the day Gramps moved in. They're all retired and mostly chill AF. That one dude just had some issues. Some people age like fine wine, others age like milk. Destroyed his backyard? Now, what does neighbor mean by his? This just in from CERN. The Large Hadron Collider could be used to determine the mass of the violin being played. OP replied. Lol, I think he was referring to the fact that all his pavers were ripped up and removed, not just the ones beyond the boundary line, leaving behind exposed dirt that turned into a mud field by the time he returned. He never was able to put in new pavers back there as county told the park that pavers close to their boundary line would cause water to run off into their land, possibly flooding the existing gopher and endangered tortoise holes. Based on this comment I'm kind of assuming he lives in Florida. I am so glad the county showed up and took enforcement action on the neighbor's violation. The natural lands in Florida are slowly being chipped away, and it's important to take every little violation seriously. How long was he gone for? I'm betting that original fine doubled at the least. OP replied. I think it was just shy of 3 months from the original notice date. Not sure what the final fine ended up being, but Gramps said a few more weeks and the guy's car could have been auctioned off with the proceeds going towards the fines, so he was lucky. Man, imagine if Gramps bought the truck. Smiley face. Great story. One thing I'd like to add is never underestimate old people. You never know what skills and knowledge they had when they were younger that can and will totally duck you. OP replied. So true. I can imagine being on that survey team. I'm a GIS student, so it's not an unlikely possibility for a career. This is a very happy thought. It's a shame more people don't understand property lines. I stake out road right-of-ways and utility easements, and I've seen a few houses built right on the line. Gonna have a bad time when the road gets widened or when a utility decides to use that space. Good luck with your GIS studies, this profession is a ton of fun. I like surveyors ever since kids kicked the ball. This is Europe, soccer is popular. Behind a hedge at the newly bought house, neighbor screamed at them when they went to pick up the ball. That area is his. Well, there was no fencing and he claimed the hedge is the boundary, and I was like, that's not how I read the property map. Surveyors were called. I now have a hedge and a bit of extra land. As a former park ranger of 16 years, this makes me so ducking happy. OP replied. Park ranger? You are my hero. You must see so much entitled, ignorant, willfully stupid behavior. I can't even imagine the stories you have. You have 30 days to move your car. You have 10 days. Your car has been impounded. Your car has been crushed into a cube. You have 30 days to move your cube.